Hello and welcome back to Pack the Rock Podcast. I am your host, Carlo Barone, joined by Max Parker and Evan Gerke of the HoosierNet. And guys, we didn't have a podcast last week, and it's been a wild week, even at the game. So we got to talk about that first and foremost. Would you guys like to take the floor?
We were scheduled to have our podcast on Tuesday as normal, and then Franklin Hall was closed because there was a man in the sewers barricading himself.
Yeah.
Which is really quite the ride all in of itself. I know I ran into Max there kind of covering as they took him into custody, but that was certainly a day.
That was something else.
Yeah. A goal, I just totally changing subjects, but I have a feeling today is going to be one of those days for me, just changing subjects on the podcast. My goal for the pod is to stand up straight or sit up straight as much as I can.
Good posture.
Because in the intro, so I'm going to raise
lift
my
your
mic.
Yeah, maybe you should lift your mic a little bit.
Much better.
Good posture, Max. I like how
Thanks.
you're sitting up straight and your shoulders are straight, and you look like you're ready to go. So
I am. I'm ready.
glad
I'm
you're
ready
ready
to
for this
talk
episode.
Indiana football.
Absolutely. I mean, they've played 2 games now since we've had our last podcast, and thanks to the man in the sewer and also an emergency situation at the game at Cincinnati, you could say
true.
we've had a week.
We
I
have
feel like we should clarify
coverage.
why you just mentioned an emergency situation in Cincinnati.
I
The
still don't
fire
really know what
alarms went
happened.
off. There were
everyone was
firemen
okay.
there. We were all okay.
We were all okay.
They didn't even evacuate us. We just decided that we needed to leave because the alarm was going off and it was annoying.
Yeah, it wouldn't
And
stop.
we ran into I don't know if it was an EMT or policeman in
An
the
officer.
stairwell, an officer who was like, "Oh yeah, you guys are fine," but we headed out anyway. There's a few fire trucks outside the main entrance to the press box, but everything was all right. It wasn't a real emergency. It was a fake emergency.
Darn good press food.
Very good. It was one of the best that I've had in my 4 years of covering athletics now.
That baked ZT was very good.
Little garlic rolls. The brownies were also very good.
Wow, those brownies. I would have had 2 or 3 if they weren't gone.
They did go fast. I would have swiped some.
I definitely had 2.
I would have taken a few for the road.
They had like snacks. They had pretzels and popcorn.
They had it
I've
all.
never seen someone do that before.
They had a salad making bar.
They did.
That was great.
They treated us right.
Yeah.
They did.
Indiana, I'm looking at you. You need to step your game up.
Yeah, Memorial Stadium's.
I just fill up on chips.
We go there and cover games.
I just
So,
had to remind myself about my posture.
Oh, there you go.
Should
Only
we
a few
talk
minutes
ball?
in. Yeah,
I think we probably
should. But
Let's talk ball.
like I mentioned in the past, we did not cover or we did not talk about the Western Kentucky game, which is arguably could be one of Indiana's most exciting games this year. They won 33-30, game-winning field goal, 51 yards from Charles Campbell. I mean, we were all there. Obviously, since it was last week, we're not going to talk about it too much before Cincinnati. But what were your overall takeaways from the game?
Oh, oops.
Anything, Max?
The field goal?
I'll start by just reminding everyone of how much of a second half team Indiana has been. And we're going to talk about this more with Cincinnati, I think. But
Yeah.
I mean, against Idaho, against Illinois, it's taken, late drives, a lot of second half adjustments to kind of come out and be a better version of the team. And, this idea was solidified this week, but against Western Kentucky, it was a reminder that Indiana still needs to figure out what's wrong in the first half in order for them to kind of reach maybe their potential as a football team. I don't know really where that disconnect is coming from, but Western Kentucky definitely. We all watched that game and we're sitting in the press box, going like what's going on wrong in the first half. I've started my little recap story about how Indiana is just something is lost and then they come back and in rather impressive manner they beat a Western Kentucky team that is pretty good. They put up 78 points on Saturday. Like, this is not a bad Western Kentucky team. It's a team that Indiana probably should be beating when they're on the schedule, but it's definitely not a bad team, and it'll be a good win if going that strength of schedule at the end of the season.
Carlo looks like he has something to say.
They put up 78 last week.
They were. Let me check. They
That's
were
a lot of
playing.
points. That's a lot of points.
That makes that Indiana win. I feel a little bit better.
73. Wow.
73 to nothing against FIU.
Shutout.
Yeah.
A donut.
It's almost like that
donut.
Austin Pay win. I think they won 98-0. Whoa.
Who won 98-0?
Oh, SFA.
Or
It was Stephen F.
I don't know why I
Austin.
said that, but
Didn't
yeah,
they-
yeah.
Well, they
beat
played Western
Warner?
Kentucky. Yeah, it was a
Warner?
pretty small school, but they've
It's
got
not like-
Western Kentucky's got UTSA this week, so that could be a decent matchup. Very high flying Western Kentucky offense there.
I mean, any offense that's putting up 73 points on the board and Indiana holds them to half of that is,
Yeah.
I mean, that's still pretty impressive. I remember going into the game that Western Kentucky was averaging well over 40 a game.
Mm-hmm.
Indiana held them to 30.
The fewest points scored this season.
Don't want to say it was a great defensive performance by any means, but it eventually, it got it done. They only allowed 13 the whole second half, so
Yeah.
that's it can't be that mad when you're allowing 13 and a half.
Yeah.
That's pretty good, and I think that it was too close, yes, for a team that they beat last year, but it was also in a very similar game to the one last year, where IU had to make. I guess this year they had to make the comeback instead of hold off the comeback, but I still think it was a key win for them because now they're halfway to bowl eligibility.
Mm-hmm.
Now, obviously, they dropped the one against Cincinnati. We're going to talk about here in a sec, but they're halfway there. They've already have 3 wins versus 2 of all of last year. So now they only need to win 3 of these Big Ten games to get a bowl game. Now, only is not the best way to put it, but there are definitely games on the schedule they can win. So, enough with Western Kentucky. Obviously, it was an exciting game. Walk-off field goal. You love to go to those games. Now on to the not-so-good first part of Indiana football this year. They obviously dropped the game against Cincinnati, and they kind of dropped it. And I would say the second quarter was pretty much the last hope. They lost 45-24. We were all there, like we always are. What are your guys' overall thoughts just from the game?
I mean, honestly, like, I would just say we don't need to spend too much. We honestly could quick go through Cincinnati because we didn't learn much at all, new-wise. I mean, the first half, they came out slow. They were able to move the ball, and then the drive just got stalled right away, and they had to settle for a field goal. And then it was just... From there, I had to pause for a yawn. But... From there, it was just kind of inconsistencies on the offensive line, inability to run the ball. Yeah, kind of the story of the season so far.
I do want to say, too, as we continue to talk about this game a little bit, we might try to justify some of the things in this loss. And I want to say out front that Indiana got beat. Like, there was no way to avoid the fact that they got beat. And, I tweeted out my game story on Saturday. I think I was still at the McDonald's when I tweeted it out. We made a stop at McDonald's on our drive home.
That was...
Anyway, I in my tweet, I said that they nearly salvaged, the game. I didn't say a win, but they did come back to make it close. And this was never a game on anyone's schedule that people expected Indiana to win. I don't know anyone even the people who I talked to who are like, oh, Indiana's going to win 9 games this year. Even they predicted Cincinnati to lose, Cincinnati to beat Indiana this week. So during the game, I'm seeing all these takes on Twitter and afterwards, and obviously Twitter is not the best place to be for your reasonable Indiana football takes.
What?
Wait, what? No way.
I thought that's where you go.
That's the only place you go.
Get it? Carlo and I are being funny.
Very good. That was funny.
That
But
was
the people on Twitter were all like freaking out about this loss. And it's like, what did you expect from Indiana in this game? You maybe obviously wanted something a little bit better, especially in the first half. There were some brutal mistakes that really kept this game from actually being winnable for Indiana. It was 38-10 at halftime, and it really should have been 31. That last score should never have happened. You're also, the 45 only really happened because, a bad fair catch or a non-fair catch call on a punt pins Indiana at the 5. Don't get anything going on with your offense because you've trained them trying to make this comeback happen in this hole you dug yourselves into. Yeah. And then you give up a 2-yard touchdown after turnover on downs because you can't punt it because you have to do something to score. So, the score probably looks a little bit worse than it should have been, but those are because of those mistakes that Indiana made that killed them in this game. And that's the things that they have to clean up, especially for the winnable game, something like a Nebraska this weekend or a Rutgers down the road. But even against a team like Michigan State, who if you don't have those mistakes, you might be able to knock off. You just have to be better at the things that, your D1 school you should be able to do.
Yep.
I agree with you. Basically said how the score kind of didn't reflect the whole game. Second half, Indiana, I would say, pretty much won. They only allowed 7 points, like you said, and it's because they turned the ball over inside their own 5, and Cincinnati pretty much had to walk in to get a touchdown. Well, without that, they shut them out the whole second half. And shutting out a team and a program like Cincinnati, obviously they didn't, but if they didn't give them a layup, they would have. Shutting out a team like that is impressive.
And again, if they don't make some of those mistakes and dig yourself in that hole in the first half, they probably scored more than 14. You know, they had that turnovers on downs at the Cincinnati 5, which was because they had to go for a touchdown because that's where the game was at. You know, maybe you get a field goal there, or maybe there's a few other drives where you settle for a field goal instead of trying to force things. And, you know, 17, 20 points isn't even out of the question for that second half for Indiana. But again, it's because you dug yourself in such a hole in the first half.
There was a point in the game, I remember, that they had the ball inside Cincinnati's red zone, down 14 with 10 minutes left in the game. If you know context, that game script to me, that team that is down by 14 is 100% still in the game. And until they turned the ball over on that possession, they pretty much were in the game. You could tell that the halftime adjustments were huge.
If you're looking at the last, you start the second half with a touchdown. I'm looking at the drive, the play-by-play for the drives for Indiana. After that huge interception that Tywan Mullen got on the tip ball, that was really big for the momentum, and it kind of made it feel like Indiana maybe could have brought themselves back in the game. Maybe not one, but whatever. After that, 2 3-and-outs and punts, a turnover on downs that ended at Cincinnati's 5. Then you get another touchdown, then a punt, and then 3 straight turnovers on downs. That's what kills you is when the offense needed to move the most, it was just out of juice.
Yeah.
And Cincinnati's got a really good defense, so that has a lot to do with it. But, you know, Bazelak's arm had to be taxed after how much he threw. He said the school record was 66 passes and didn't even complete half of them. He was only a 47% completion rate. The offense just, you know, the run game wasn't really working outside of that one long Sean Shivers run. There was just too much that they needed to do right in that second half. And they couldn't even do some of it. They did a few things right, but they weren't even close to doing enough of it right.
They had, I don't want to say impossible task in front of them, but going into the locker room down as much as they were, it's pretty much almost a impossible task. Obviously, we've already talked about the first half. They blow them out of the water the first half. Indiana goes in the locker room just, I don't want to say defeated because they came out hot, but they came down a lot. So second half, obviously, they do a lot better. What do you guys see different in the second half that they weren't doing in the first?
Yeah, well, I mean, the defense really switched it around. And I'm going to go on Evan's computer because I left mine at home, and we're going to go back to the drives page just so you at home know what I'm doing on Evan's computer. If you look at the drives all in the second half, they go as follows. Interception, punt.
These are Cincinnati's drives.
This is Cincinnati's offensive drives. Interception, punt, 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 punt,
4 straight
punt.
3-and-outs.
Yes.
That was the time. If they were going to come back, that was the time to do it.
And then turnover on downs, punt, that late touchdown.
The one that started at Indiana's 2-yard line, which is
not really.
So I mean, plays
yeah.
too.
They almost held up on that.
Yeah. And other than that, it was all interception, turnover on downs, and then 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 punts. So for me, I mean, that second half adjustment was the defense really figured its stuff out. You only had 2 punts from the Cincinnati offense in the first half, 4 touchdowns. The rest, yeah. And I think that speaks for itself.
I was thinking in preparation for this podcast today, I was like, well, Indiana's run defense was actually pretty good. So I was like, well, maybe that's because the second half it's a blowout. You know, they're trying to run the ball more and run out the clock. But that really wasn't the case. The first half, Cincinnati ran the ball 12 times. Second half, they ran 18. 17 for 21 in pass attempts in the first half, 7 for 19 in the second half. So they ran a few more plays, you know, especially on the ground, but they only threw 2 less passes. So it wasn't like, you know, against, was it Idaho where Indiana didn't throw a single pass in the fourth quarter? Like, Cincinnati was still trying to run the ball or to throw the ball, and Indiana, whatever adjustments they made to prevent themselves from getting, you know, those blown coverages like they were consistently in the first half seemed to have worked. And you just need to keep that in mind moving forward.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I think the second half, the run defense stepped up big. And then, obviously, they got the interception with Mullen, which put them in a good position to come back. Obviously, they didn't. But you can't talk about the game without mentioning, yeah, they played a lot better the second half, but most of that was the defense. When we talk about the second half and how well they played, we're not talking about the offense. And unfortunately, they couldn't really get it going. They only scored one touchdown in the second half?
Yep.
Yeah, one touchdown the whole second half, and you have a span where Cincinnati goes 4 3-and-outs in a row. You got to capitalize on that, especially when you're going into an environment like Cincinnati. I mean, they mentioned it on the broadcast, in the press box. It was the 7th largest crowd in Cincinnati history. So when you're going into that, you can't not take advantage of the opportunities given. So that's kind of highlighted the offense, I feel like, up to this point. They've had games where they've run the ball well against, Idaho. But they've had the games where they've run the ball well, but they haven't had a dominant rushing performance that has taken over almost the passing offense where you can't pass, and the reason you're winning is because you're running. You haven't had that as Indiana yet. Yeah. So the inconsistencies on offense, they have to change if they want to win any of these next 8 games against the Big Ten. Now, looking at the Big Ten slate as a whole, obviously they start with Nebraska this week, but what do you guys see now that we have a month of play with this Indiana team? What do you guys see Indiana doing well, or what they need to improve on to win some of those Big Ten games, because they are going to be challenging?
Yeah, I mean, again, Cincinnati was a good team, but the competition just continues to go up from here as you enter Big Ten play. That, first of all, that offensive line has to be better facing off, especially against stronger, bigger, and just more talented defensive fronts. I think that's going to be okay. We need to. The reason I'm laughing in the podcast rundown, we have the Nebraska section, but Carlo put Nebraska.
Yo, my bad. I spelled check.
So we need to say that the rest of the day. Starting off with the game against Nebraska, I think the offensive line just needs to be stronger, because when you have more talented Nebraska defensive linemen, I love this so much. When you have more talented defensive linemen, it's just going to get more difficult. And I don't know if the unit needs to play more together. I know they're already missing Matthew Bedford, and the guy who replaced him, Parker Hanna, is struggling so far. So,
I mean, last week against Cincinnati, the offensive line. This is pass blocking on PFF, so it includes some the running backs and stuff when they get in. But 6 sacks, which is not pretty.
No.
25 hurries, 37 pressures allowed.
37?
That's a lot.
That's a ridiculous amount.
How many plays did they run? 100 something?
104. Let me quickly
also
pull
a
up.
lot.
Yeah,
Western Kentucky.
Pressures?
They allowed 17 pressures at Western Kentucky and 2 sacks. Week 1 against Illinois, they gave up 17 pressures, no sacks. And Luke Haggard was your best offensive lineman that game, and that is the key to this team is the offensive line, because it allows both obviously the run game and the passing game to step up. And we say this, every week for 2 seasons now, is when is this offensive line going to get better? And I don't even know if Tom Allen knows the answer to that question. And it always shocked me that Parker Hanna was the only offensive lineman they brought in this year. I think maybe one recruit who is not going to be playing this year because you need some time to bulk up to be an offensive lineman. But at the Big Ten level, I just don't understand why, after a unit that was brutally bad last year, they did nothing to bring in someone who can protect their quarterback. I mean, look what Michael Penix is doing with a competent offensive line in Washington.
The Heisman candidate.
He's a Heisman candidate. He's got the most passing yards in the nation. He looks like a superstar, and the potential for that was always there at Indiana. And he got some decent protection his first couple of years, and they were pretty good for a bit. But I mean, what can you expect? Like, Connor Bazelak can throw the ball 100 times, and if he doesn't have an offensive line to allow the receivers time to get open,
it won't matter.
It won't matter.
And I mean, moving into just the sheer number of passing attempts, Bazelak kind of talked about that. I mean, when you're throwing the ball that much, injuries start to be a concern, and just the long-term sustainability of being able to throw that much. So, I mean, he's to the point where he's talking about on his throwaways being conservative and not launching his arm too far to throw the ball away, like conserving energy on those throwaways. I mean, it's to the point where he's thrown the ball away so many times that it's affecting his play elsewhere. And just, I mean, it's clear there's some sort of, and they say in press conferences that there's a lot of trust and relationship there and everything, but the numbers show that he's not being adequately backed up by his line.
Yeah, I've never thrown a football at any level past, playground recess football.
And I was terrible.
But I was a pitcher in high school, and I threw, there are times I threw, 100, 114 pitches. I know how tiring it is to get to that level. Your arm feels like it's going to fall off. And when you're playing at a Big Ten level and you need to step it up a lot more than I did on my JV high school team, I can only imagine like how tired his arm is, because he has to try to do so much to bring this team back in the games, and that's just not sustainable.
Yep. I can also touch on that. I was always the middle school recess quarterback, and I have Hall of Fame stats at St. Paul Catholic School in Valparaiso. I have Hall of Fame stats, intramural champion and everything. So I know exactly how Bazelak feels. In fact, I've thrown close to as many passes as he has this year.
Probably.
But all jokes aside,
how was your offensive line?
Offensive line was a little tough. Half the time they didn't even show up, so I kind of worked on that 5-second blitz thing. I'm really cool with that.
Okay.
But after 5 seconds, if you're holding on to it, I know exactly how Bazelak feels. You're gonna get
Bazelak's got way less time than that. So
well, I'm saying like if he holds on to the ball, I know how he feels, because he doesn't have he definitely does not have anywhere close to 5 seconds of protection. But I can rely on my 5 Mississippi blitz count to keep me safe in the pocket.
You want to know what I played in middle school? D-line. I was short. No, I was tall. I was kind of tall, but I was very lanky, and I got just demolished.
Coach tried to put me on D-line once, and I was not having it. I was always an offensive guy. But speaking of the football team that we were talking about.
Back on track.
Yeah, back on track.
Is this not a podcast to talk about our recess exploits?
We need to make
I was a big tag fan too. If the field is too wide to play football, I would jump into a few games of tag.
Tag rocks.
Tag, yep. Or occasionally kickball on the tarmac.
Ooh.
Yeah.
Foursquare, dude. Foursquare rocks.
I was never much of a Foursquare guy. I have played Foursquare since elementary school, but earlier on, I wasn't really a Foursquare guy.
I don't think I've ever been a Foursquare guy, but
I'm sorry.
I don't know if sorry is the good way to.
No, it is. You're missing out.
Was I?
Yeah.
Foursquare
rocks.
I think before the
know.
next home game, we should get there earlier and play a little Foursquare.
Oh, they definitely have one of the. They definitely have one of the tailgating parking lots.
You just need chalk. You make your own.
Oh, yes, that's true. All right.
What if we? Yeah.
Yeah.
That's all I got.
All right. HN Foursquare. We can get Max or Eden or one of the photographers on as our 4th member.
Cool.
Or if the fans want to join us for Hoosier Net Foursquare.
Oh.
Cool. All right, that's going to do it for the Pack the Rock podcast. That's a joke.
Yeah,
we still got to preview last game here. So
I know, that was part of the joke.
That was very funny.
This is going off the rails.
People just clicked off the podcast because of you, Max.
So far, I've only seen one part I'll consider cutting, but that's it. IU Nebraska bowed out this weekend for the first time since their 2020 season, where they looked like a completely different program.
Wasn't that 2019? Did they play? They didn't play in 2020.
Or 2019. Sorry,
Yeah.
I misspoke. But IU won 38-31 against Nebraska. That was the last time they played. Now, obviously, Nebraska's a whole different program. They just fired Scott Frost a couple weeks ago. So now this will be the interim coach's second game, I believe, coaching.
Third game.
Second or third?
Let's look it up. He got
maybe
fired.
second. I think you're right.
I think it is second. But surprisingly, Nebraska is favored by 6 right now. Obviously, the game is on the road for Indiana, only their second game on the road. But Vegas says they're going to lose by a touchdown. first and foremost, what do you guys think will be key for Indiana to go into Nebraska and win?
I got two things. Offensive line play needs to be stronger, and then just coming out consistently in play a full 60 minutes of football.
Yeah, I think Max really hit that. I think those are really the two things that you need. I'll add just make sure that your defense isn't getting burned.
Yeah.
Yeah, they've had times where the deep ball has been a problem. I mean, it's pretty much almost, I feel like every game that they give up at least one longer air score. So I think Max hit it in the head. They need to play a full 60 minutes because they've had a lot of these games where they've played a good half and a bad half, and they've nearly won. They played a good half and a really, really bad half, and they couldn't come back from it against Cincinnati. So I think playing a full game is going to be key. If you guys had to choose one player in Indiana to have, like, they need to have a good game in order for this team to win, who would it be?
Taiwan Mullen is my guess, because I think they need him to really be the All-American that he was 2 years ago. Not allowing big chunk plays. And Coach Allen talked about that after the game. He was like, some of our better guys on defense led up some chunk plays in the first half. I think he's got to shore that up.
I'm gonna go on the other side of the ball. I was thinking about saying Devon Matthews. Instead, I'm gonna go DJ Matthews. We've seen a lot from Cam Camper the last few weeks. He had 126 yards against Cincinnati. He was really good. He made some grown man catches going over guys, but DJ Matthews had 2 catches for -3 yards.
Did we ever find out if he was injured in the second half?
He was. So they talked about that at the press conference. He was a little bit knocked up on that punt return, obviously, which is a big reason why he wasn't, breaking out on the score sheet. But he should be fine. I'm pretty sure they said he'll be back for this weekend, or at least it's day to day. I don't think there is much long-term concern. I think it was partially being overly cautious kind of thing. He also got hit really hard on one of those catches early on. But DJ Matthews is, he was the name at wide receiver before season. We talked a lot about Cam Camper as maybe being another guy to watch. But, if DJ Matthews has, 75, 100 yards, as well as just an average day from Cam Camper, Indiana's going to be looking pretty good on the scoreboard up there.
I was going to say Mullen as well because he got burned a lot last week. He needs to have a bounce back game, but you already talked about that. I'm going to go with Shivers. I mean, you've had one really good game from him against Idaho where he rushed for 100 yards or over 100 yards, but other than that, he's been very, very quiet. So I think in order for him to win, I'm not going to ask, please give us 150 yards, 2 touchdowns on the ground, and a dominating win. But I think for Indiana to win, they're going to have to – everyone in the nation knows Indiana is going to throw it all the time. They have the most pass attempts, like we've already mentioned. So they're going to play for the pass more than the run because the teams know that they can't run the ball. And Shivers is going to have to take that, and he's going to have to do well with the situation at hand, because if not, they're going to be in some trouble. And especially if Nebraska plays the pass more than the run and Indiana can't run the ball, I mean, it's over. I'm not going to say that Indiana's going to lose the game, but when you're one-dimensional offense and they guard to that dimension, it's really hard to win any football game. Nonetheless, a Big Ten one where defenses are usually pretty stout.
Yep.
I'm not going to say Nebraska has the best defenses, but the average in the Big Ten is pretty good. So enough about this game. On to predictions. I will say, Max, we didn't do predictions last week, obviously, like we said. So we did them in the press box before the game, like literally under 10 minutes left before the game. We should probably do these predictions. Yeah. So
we did.
I picked Cincinnati. Evan also picked Cincinnati. Max picked Cincinnati at first, but then had a change of heart and chose Indiana.
Yeah.
Obviously, he got it incorrect.
Didn't work out.
It's all good, man. We're all still here. So on the season, myself, Carlo, 4-0. Max and Evan are both 3-1. But I will say, you guys have been more risky with your picks than I have up to this point.
63-3.
Yeah.
We'll bury that take.
This Big Ten slate is gonna It'll be telling.
It'll shake up the standings.
100%.
There's a chance to really shake them up right away
really
against Nebraska.
This week.
Yeah.
I actually really haven't thought about my prediction.
Okay.
I kind of have a feeling who I'm gonna pick, but I need to figure out a score. So
you should go first then, Carlo.
Well, no, I was actually gonna say Max should go first because he got it wrong last week. When you got it wrong, I made you go first. So I'm just being fair.
34-27, Indiana. This Nebraska team lost to Northwestern, and Northwestern has lost to the Southern Illinois Salukis or Southeastern.
This Nebraska team also lost to Georgia Southern.
Yeah.
And they got blown out pretty bad by Oklahoma.
Yeah. So we're going with that.
Yeah,
Lock it in.
I'm not gonna lie. I'm contemplating a little bit which side I want to take. I'm gonna say 28-23 Indiana.
Okay.
I think it'll be
Neither of us going for Nebraska.
no. I think it'll be a little bit of a closer game. I think Indiana needs to win it. I think hopefully Cincinnati kind of shocked them into gear a little bit about what they need to do to kind of maintain pace for bowl eligibility. And I think this is like one of those games that you obviously really need to win.
Mm-hmm.
IU has seen their schedule. They know who they play. They do not have an easy schedule by any means. However, in this game, I'm going to pick the Indiana football Hoosiers to win 31-25. Though I think it is one of their only winnable games left on their schedule, I think they do take advantage of it because I just think they're in. Honestly, to be blunt with you guys, I think they're just in a better situation than Nebraska right now. They don't have a head coach that was fired weeks ago. They don't have expectations that they're not just throwing in the toilet. No one really had. I don't really know what the expectations were for Indiana football this year. After you have a 2020 year where they're really good, and then you have a 2021 year where they're really bad. So expectations kind of on campus were confused. We really don't know what to think of this team. So I think IU is going to jump at the opportunity, and I think they are going to take care of this Nebraska team. I don't think it'll be easy, but I do think they'll get their first, or I guess their second Big Ten win this year.
I also want to say Nebraska had a bye week last week, which means that's 2 weeks to prepare for Indiana.
Yeah.
And 2 more weeks for the interim coach to kind of figure it out, see if he wants to make changes.
Get his sailor's legs under him.
Sure.
Definitely that.
So
Wait, is that or is it sea legs?
Sea legs.
Get his sea legs under him.
So
Arg.
Nebraska could be throwing some things at Indiana that they haven't seen before. They're also going to be more prepared for what Indiana might do, which means that Indiana is going to have to be a little bit more creative. So this might not be the Nebraska team that we've been expecting to face all season because of just the fact that they have a different coach now and have had plenty of time to adapt to that new coach and to prepare for Indiana.
It'll all be telling on Saturday. I believe it's another night game in
It
Nebraska.
is.
7:30. Max, you'll be there, right?
I will be in attendance at Nebraska.
Nebraska.
Yeah.
Nebraska. What is it?
Nebraska.
Nebraska.
Yeah.
You wrote it, Carlo. You should know.
Yeah.
I know. I wrote it with that intention.
Good.
So
Good.
Yeah.
Yeah, I will be at Nebraska. I'm really excited for the atmosphere. I've heard Nebraska fans really come out and support their Nebraska team.
heard they go hard in Nebraska.
What?
Well, that is all we have today for Pack the Rock Podcast, Episode 4. I've been your
Max
host,
needs a nap.
Carlo, along with Max Parker and Evan Kirky of the Hoosier Net. We'll see you guys next week.
Arr.